Beware the penis-stealing witches! Did you know we used to put radium inside health drinks, and it did horrifying things to its drinkers? Also, the guy who discovered Uranus actually thought the sun was cold. And when we tell you about when doctors realized babies were capable of feeling pain, your jaw's gonna hit the floor. We'll be explaining it all on today's episode of the Infographics Show. Things people used to believe you will laugh at today. Number 18. Let's start with trains. When they were first introduced to the public in the 1800s, there were so many bizarre beliefs about them that the medical community started to take note of railway madmen. What exactly is a railway madman, you might ask? It's a made-up idea grounded in some of the weirdest bunk science we've ever heard. Today, if you're on a highway, stuck by someone doing 30 miles an hour, you might find yourself tearing your hair out in sheer frustration. But in the 1860s and 1870s, they believed that going 30 miles per hour on a train was so intense, so dangerous, that it might deprive the brain of oxygen. That, coupled with the nerve-shattering noise these metal behemoths generated, could drive normal people to violent madness. So next time you're on a train, be sure to stay vigilant of the railway madmen. Or don't, because obviously all of this was complete nonsense. Somehow, that's not even the craziest theory connected to the old-timey trains. Some doctors believed that if the train speed reached 50 miles per hour, uteruses would start flying out of bodies. Thankfully, that's just another crackpot theory. And that wasn't the only insane belief that people had about uteruses in the past. Number 17. These days, we use the word hysteria to describe chaos, panic, or a group caught up in collective madness. But back in the days of vintage medicine, hysteria was something very specific, a so-called illness that, according to the experts of the time, could only affect women. Hysteria comes from the Latin word hystericus, meaning womb, because the doctors of the time believed that madness was caused by the woman's uterus detaching and wandering around the afflicted body. One of the most common forms of treatment for this would be the doctors manually stimulating the lady parts of these women to the point of happiness, which would presumably lure that rogue womb back to its proper place. But our next archaic belief is so downright nutty that it makes the railway madmen look like railway sane men, and wandering uteruses look like an accredited psychology degree. Number 16. Welcome to the wild and wacky world of spontaneous generation, an ancient theory for where certain kinds of life came from. Even though it's both utterly wrong and completely insane, we've almost got to respect it for its sheer loony creativity. So, how exactly did spontaneous generation work? The theory goes that certain creatures can be spontaneously generated out of non-organic matter, rather than them just being attracted to that matter. For example, people believed that wasps were spontaneously generated by the rotting of dead horses. The ancient Greeks believed that snakes originally came from the blood of Medusa. But when the Medusa blood ran out, snakes just spontaneously generated from the bone marrow of dead people's spines. Frogs were believed to have just emerged from mud, fully formed. And if you put a dirty cloth into wheat for 21 days, you'd get mice. The list goes on, but that seems like enough to get the idea of just how crazy this belief was. And even crazier, it didn't fully die out until the 19th century when Louis Pasteur, the namesake for the pasteurization process, presented the world with proof of microorganisms reproducing. So you better get your dirty underwear out of the wheat shed. It won't win you any pet mice, no matter how hard you try. Proponents of spontaneous generation were on a similar mental track to the lunatics who came up with the vegetable lamb of Tartary. Number 15. Yes, it is every bit as bizarre as it sounds. A strange blend of misinformation, myth, and a hefty dose of Orientalism. The legend dates all the way back to ancient Greece, specifically the historian Herodotus. He and others believed in the existence of a mythical plant creature from Asia that supposedly grew fruit unlike anything else from Earth. Tiny living lambs. Stay with us here, but we can't promise it's going to get any less weird. The mythical beast was both a plant and an animal. The lambs would grow at the end of the stalks and slowly eat all of the other foliage around the plant. And when the foliage ran out, the lambs would die, and farmers would then harvest the dead lamb plant's wool. Its blood also apparently tasted as sweet as honey, except of course it didn't because the ridiculous thing never actually existed. People did really believe it for centuries, though. Let's leave the world of bunk biology for a second and instead look at an insane, vintage idea from the world of astronomy. Number 14. William Herschel was an extremely important figure in the field of astronomy. He even discovered Uranus. We mean the planet, of course. Not that he was a devoted booty hunter, but even geniuses can still miss now and then. Like with Herschel's theory that not only was the sun not hot, it was cool enough to be habitable. Agnes Clerk, a 19th century astrology historian, described that Herschel thought the sun was a cool, dark, solid globe clothed in luxuriant vegetation. It was richly stored with inhabitants, protected by a heavy cloud canopy from the intolerable glare of the upper luminous region. Now, I hope we don't need to tell you that that isn't true, but hey, you've at least got to admire the guy's optimism. But we probably shouldn't think about fleeing to another planet until we've fixed all the problems we're facing here on Earth. Number 13. If you asked a God-fearing peasant from the Middle Ages, they might tell you that a major problem is witches stealing your penis. Now that's pretty weird already, but when you find out about why these servants of the devil were performing magical dong abductions, it is going to get even weirder. Witches performing anti-penis spells have been an oddly consistent fixture of myths all across the globe. But in Europe, they found their roots in a 15th century book called the Malleus Maleficarum by a witch hunter Heinrich Kramer. Among the hundreds of absolutely wild and obviously completely unscientific claims in the book, Kramer said that witches liked to use their magic to make penises of their victims vanish. They then keep those penises, still living independently of the bodies that they've been taken from, as a kind of pet, feeding them oats to keep them alive. So at least if a witch does take your penis, you can take comfort in knowing that its new owner is taking good care of it. Yes, people really did believe this. From one cylinder to another, let's talk about carrots. Number 12. When you were young, especially if you were in the older end of our audience, you might have heard that if you made like Bugs Bunny and you ate your carrots, it would help improve your vision. This, as it turns out, is actually a complete fabrication. You should still eat your carrots though, they're good for you. But unlike a lot of things on this list, the misinformation around the ability of carrots to improve your vision wasn't just misinformation built on ignorance. It was a concerted propaganda campaign from the Allies during World War II. It is true that without the retinol and the vitamin A that carrots are rich in, your ability to see in the dark will be diminished. The British Air Ministry seized on this fact to make a cunning misinformation campaign against Nazi pilots during the war. They didn't want to show their hand with the radar technology that they were using to detect German planes. So, to throw the German forces off of the scent, the British Air Ministry claimed that their pilots were eating huge amounts of carrots, giving them far better night vision than their Nazi counterparts. This not only kept the radar tech a secret, it also tricked whole generations into thinking that carrots will give them supervision. And if that applies to you, sound off about it in the comments. Speaking of comments, this section might get us some angry comments from people who still believe it. We're talking about homeopathy. Number 11. Homeopathy, started in 1796 by German physician Samuel Hahnemann, is too Byzantine to discuss in full here. But one of the most deranged and completely unscientific principles is the idea of like cures like. So what exactly does that mean? It's the fantastical view that illnesses can be cured by taking in a cure that is similar to the afflicted part. Suffering from cold or hay fever? Nose running and eyes burning up? Well, since onions are known to cause those symptoms when you're cutting them, you should take a medicine that contains onions. Having trouble sleeping or got a restless mind? Since drinking too much coffee can cause those symptoms, taking a medicine that contains coffee is the best homeopathic way to solve it. Do we even need to tell you that this is completely unscientific and it won't help at all? There is that old expression, what do you call alternative medicine that works? Medicine. But before we get too smug about how dumb people were in the distant past, here is a fresher discovered piece of misinformation that you might have even believed until recently, or maybe you even still do. Number 10. If you read any human biology textbook in the late 90s and early 2000s, you might have seen a diagram of the human tongue that is divided into different kinds of chemicals or flavors that each part of the tongue can detect. Sweet, spicy, salty, sour, you get the idea. However, this idea, known as the taste map, has actually been completely debunked. All of your taste buds play a role in processing every flavor, regardless of where on the tongue they're situated. Despite it being discredited though, the taste map is still taught in plenty of schools. So if your science teacher tries to teach you the taste map, tell them they're wrong, and then tell them the Infographics Show sent you. Number 9. History is full of bizarre attempts to understand how our bodies work. One of the weirdest paths to that noble goal is the ancient belief of humorism, which persisted all the way up until the 17th century. This theory claimed that health was defined by the 4 humors present in every body: black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. And if you were unhealthy, it was just because you had an imbalance of the humors, and you needed a little more or a little less of one of those 4 gross internal oozes. And science is absolutely full of bizarre historical missteps like this. Number 8. If you ever heard the phrase disappear into the ether, it wasn't always just a poetic expression, it was a fake element that ancient and medieval scientists really believed in. Known as the 5th element, along with water, fire, air, and earth, ether or quintessence was said to be the invisible force that filled up all the empty spaces in the universe. People performed experiments to somehow quantify this mystical element all the way up until the 19th century, but Albert Einstein, the goat of physics, hammered the final nail in the ether's coffin with his theory of relativity. A running theme you'll notice in this video is that a lot of historical misconceptions come from people making wild theories based on incomplete information. Number 7. In the late 19th and early 20th century, archaeologists and geologists had an interesting problem that they needed to confront. How come you could find identical types of fossils on completely different continents? In a world before plate tectonics, that was a difficult idea to reconcile. The theory, as posed by figures like Jules Marcou, a man with a beard so magnificent they couldn't fit it all in his official photo, was land bridges. Specifically, that in ancient times there were huge natural bridges connecting to the continents, explaining how prehistoric creatures could wander between them, die, and get fossilized in completely different continents. Now, of course, we know that the answer comes from tectonic plates, the huge shifting pieces of land that make up the Earth's crust. They moved and shifted over tens of millions of years, causing the supercontinent of Pangaea to drift into the separate continents we love and endlessly fight over today. Some of humanity's weirdest, stupidest, and most dangerous false beliefs come from the world of health. Number 6. There have been some bizarre trends that have popped up over the years in the arena of short-lived health fads, like the infamous Radithor radium-enriched spring water that was sold as a health drink from 1918 to 1928. If you know anything about radium, you're already going to be cringing at this, but you're about to get even more horrified about learning what Radithor did to its most devoted customer, socialite and golf enthusiast, Eben Byers. Eben bought into every bogus health claim that Radithor made, and he loved the little tingling sensation that drinking it gave him. In fact, he loved it so much that over the course of 2 years from December 1927 to 1929, he drank 3 bottles of the stuff each day. And things were going wonderfully until he had so much radiation poisoning that it rotted off his jaw, after which he died of aggressive jaw cancer. Byers' death was so widely publicized that it contributed to the collapse of the radium craze. So in a way, his sacrifice probably saved a lot of lives in the long run. Thanks for taking one for the team, Eben. But radium wasn't the only caustic chemical that people of the past thought could improve your health rather than jeopardizing it. Number 5. You are probably already familiar with mercury, and to be familiar with mercury is also to be aware that it is extremely, extremely toxic. For many deeply misinformed and soon-to-be-dead people in history, it was known as liquid silver, and some people even thought that it could be the key to eternal life. The 2010 BC Chinese emperor Qin Shi Huangdi was given mercury pills by his court alchemist as part of his quest for immortality, and instead it ended up killing him. Because obviously that's what happened. It would also go on to become a common pharmaceutical solution in the 17th century and beyond. If by solution you specifically mean a solution to the problem of being alive, these days it's still present in some medicines including dental amalgams, cosmetics, saline solutions, eye drops, and spermicide. And we mean it'll probably kill your sperm, it just won't be the only thing it kills. There are a frankly stupid number of examples of people believing actually dangerous chemicals were A-OK, from lead to arsenic to asbestos, just like this next one. Number 4. Benzene is a chemical that smelled so sweet it often found itself used as an aftershave in the 19th century, as well as a hand disinfectant for organic chemists. By the 1920s, benzene was such a popular wonder chemical that it was used in everything from decaffeinating coffee to stripping paint. Which, let's be real, you shouldn't be putting anything that can strip paint into your coffee. And if all that heavy foreshadowing didn't clue you in, benzene turned out to be a carcinogen. So who knows how many people ended up dying awful deaths from being exposed to what they thought was a completely safe multi-purpose chemical. You ever heard the phrase, "you're blowing smoke up my butt"? Well, today it means flattering someone insincerely. But back in the 1700s, it wasn't just a figure of speech, it was an actual medical practice. If you were unconscious, say from drowning or sudden illness, doctors might see fit to give you a tobacco smoke enema, effectively turning your lower intestine into an organic bong. We really shouldn't take modern medical technology for granted, folks. Number 3. Staying on weird medical myths that were once widely believed, hold on to your nose for a second as we explore miasma theory and how it explains those weird, freaky get-ups that medieval plague doctors used to wear all the time. Before the development of germ theory, when scientists finally uncovered how microscopic organisms cause many of our illnesses, the dominant belief was something much simpler and much less accurate. From Hippocrates in ancient Greece all the way up to the late 1800s, many people believed that disease wasn't caused by germs, but by bad air. Miasma, Greek for pollution, was the term for the gross, noxious air coming out of the ground due to the rotten organic matter underneath. Inhaling these fumes were believed to be the cause for every disease, from cholera to chlamydia, and of course the infamous bubonic plague that wiped out a large swath of Europe. That is why plague doctors wore those freaky bird masks. The beak was full of pleasant fragrances, essentially a kind of tactical potpourri that stopped those bird-brained physicians from inhaling any of the deadly miasma. Of course, this is all wrong, but somehow miasma theory got even weirder than that. Some proponents of the wacky theory even thought that you could get fat from the smell of food, which sounds a little more like dieting advice from your weird mother-in-law than an actual scientific theory. But people really did believe it. But every weird, wacky belief from history tends to lead to others. Number 2. Before germ theory, doctors didn't wash their hands before or after attending to their patients. It's a miracle that the human race has survived this long. But it wasn't just ruining or ending lives of the patients, it was also messing with doctors too. Such was the tragic case of Hungarian doctor Ignác Filip Semmelweis. In 1847, he made a groundbreaking discovery. When doctors and nurses washed their hands between patients, especially in obstetricial clinics, the rates of infection and death dropped dramatically. It was a simple life-saving practice. Thinking that he could change medicine for the better, he went public about these theories and was viciously mocked by his peers. Semmelweis didn't back down, though. He knew that washing your hands as a doctor would save lives, even if nobody else did. Sadly, by 1865, he was so cruelly ridiculed and outcast for his beliefs that he had a mental breakdown and was committed to an insane asylum. There, he was beaten by the guards, and 2 weeks later, in a truly sadistic act of cosmic irony, he died of an infection, likely as a result of his beating. And all for the crime of being right just a little too early for people to accept it. These days, Doc Semmelweis is the namesake of the Semmelweis reflex, which describes a tendency to reject new evidence that contradicts established beliefs. But nothing you have heard today will even come close to the true nightmare of our ultimate weird historical belief. Number 1. Doctors used to think that babies younger than 1 year old couldn't feel pain. Obviously, it goes without saying that babies can and do feel pain. And what's particularly weird about this archaic belief is that if you go back even earlier, to the 1600s, the doctors believed that infants experienced more pain than adults. Take the words of pediatric surgeon Felix Wurtz from a 1656 quote, "If a new skin in old people be tender, what is it you think in a newborn babe? Doth a small thing pain you so much on a finger? How painful is it then to a child, which is tormented all the body over, which hath but a tender new-grown flesh?" Good point, Felix. But because history, contrary to modernist belief, is not actually in a straight line, this belief fell out of fashion in the centuries that followed. It became common medical knowledge that infants didn't feel pain, and therefore all kinds of surgeries were performed on actual babies without any kind of painkiller. These surgeries were everything from tonsillectomy to a full-on open-heart surgery, and the babies involved could feel every second of it. Thankfully, the medical community wised up, realized that babies could in fact feel pain, and medical procedures were changed accordingly. In 1999, and doctors like Wurtz were actually correct back in the 1650s. Babies feel pain even more intensely than adults. What is the wildest old belief that you've ever heard of? Was it medical, mythological, or just plain bizarre? Drop it in the comments. Now go check out why what you know about the Wild West is a lie, or watch this instead.